Hey everybody, thanks for watching. This is the second video in a series about being transformed in Christ. We have a problem that the Bible calls the flesh. So where did the flesh come from? It's important to understand that the flesh is not a thing that just spontaneously created itself after Adam and Eve sinned. The flesh is just part of being human, and it's always been part of being human. The fleshly desires that lead us into sin and temptation are the same desires that God created in us in the beginning. The problem is that Satan manipulates these desires to lead us into temptation and sin. For example, it's perfectly natural to desire self-gratification or pleasure. That desire is neutral. It's not right or wrong. It's not inherently evil or inherently good. But that desire is exactly what leads to fornication, adultery, pornography, and basically every other sexual sin and addiction. Here's another example. It's perfectly natural to desire self-worth or purpose. That desire is neutral in and of itself. It's not inherently good or evil. It's not inherently righteous or unrighteous, but that very desire is what leads to pride and things like covetousness. Here's another example. It's perfectly natural to desire self-preservation, but that is the desire that leads us to lie, cheat, steal, and kill. Examples of these processes are endless, but just consider the first sin in the Bible. Eve sinned because of her fleshly desires. Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. So Eve could see that the fruit was good for food. That's not evil in and of itself. The desire to eat is natural. Eve could also see that the fruit looked good to the eyes. That is not wrong in and of itself. Appreciating beauty is natural. Eve could also see that the fruit was desirable to make her wise. And once again, that's not evil in and of itself. The desire for knowledge is perfectly natural. So what's the problem? The problem is that carelessly, thoughtlessly, following the desires of the human flesh is not a path that leads to God. Romans chapter 8, verses 7 and 8. Because the carnal mind, that just means the fleshly mind, is enmity against God. For it is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. So then, those who are in the flesh cannot please God. It's our natural human desires that get exploited by Satan and trap us in sin. God is served with the Spirit, that is, with the mind, and not with the human flesh. The fleshly mind is controlled by the flesh. The fleshly mind is concerned only with fleshly things, and that's why the flesh is not righteous. The flesh can become like a cancer. These natural human desires can begin to grow uncontrollably outside of their God-given boundaries and begin to invade every other aspect of living and thinking. These desires of the flesh begin to interfere with the essential functions of the mind, and then eventually, if left untreated, the desires of the flesh lead to spiritual death. So do we have the ability to control the flesh? The unfortunate answer is no, we don't. A person can sometimes overcome some sins and temptations, but the reality is we don't have nearly as much control as we'd like to think that we do. This problem is described in detail by the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 7. Here's how he describes this inner conflict that we all understand. Romans chapter 7, verses 14 through 19, Paul says, "For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal," that means fleshly, sold under sin. "For what I am doing, I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I do not practice. But what I hate, that I do. If then I do what I will not to do, I agree with the law that it is good. But now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is, in my flesh, nothing good dwells. For to will is present with me, but how to perform what is good I do not find. For the good that I will to do, I do not do. But the evil that I will not to do, that I practice." So Paul is describing something that I think every honest human being can understand. We want to change, but then we don't. We have a desire to be better, but then we aren't. We want to conquer some sin or temptation, and we just don't. We don't do it, and we really don't even know how to do it. You've heard the saying, if there's a will, there's a way. Well, according to Paul, that's just not true. We may have a will to do good. Paul says that we can, but on our own, there is no way in our own flesh, in our own human mind, that we have the ability to defeat that sin. So why is it you don't do all the things that you want to do or stop doing the things that you want to stop doing? Why do you keep on sinning? It's because of what Paul describes here. The natural desires of the flesh are warring against your own will. Galatians chapter 5, verse 17. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. So here's an important reality we have to accept. We might be free to will, but we are not free to do when it comes to conquering the flesh. For example, a fish is free to want to fly, but it's not actually free to fly. A sinner is just like this. A sinner is free to want to stop sinning, but he's not free to actually stop sinning. An unconverted person is in sin all of the time, even when they're not actively sinning. And here's what I mean by that. Sin is not just a thing that you do. Sin is a way of living. It's a way of thinking. And this is the idea of Titus chapter 1, verses 15 and 16. To the pure, all things are pure. But to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. But even their mind and conscience are defiled. They profess to know God, but in works they deny him, being abominable, disobedient, and disqualified for every good work. Here's an example. My wife has a condition called ulcerative colitis and some other autoimmune conditions. The flares of manifest illness come and go, but the disease is always there. Even when she feels well, the disease is still at work in her body. And sin is like this. The unconverted sinner is always living in sin. The actual flares of sinning may come and go, but the disease is always there. Even when their behavior is good, the disease is still at work in their mind and in their body. And so all of this leads to an interesting question. How does a person ever not sin? Given the condition of the human nature, how does a person ever make a righteous decision? That's the subject of the next video. Thanks for watching.